I want to start off today's episode by thanking my sponsor for today, me. I'm going to take this moment to spotlight my book that I wrote called Sandra, a Healing Reimagining of the Babysitter from Hell. It is available as an ebook on Kindle, as well as an audiobook on Audible and several other platforms. Or you can get yourself an autographed paperback by going to aprilific.com/books. And if you would be interested in highlighting one of your products or services, I invite you to reach out to me. You can email me at aprilific@gmail.com or thesandboxpod@gmail.com. And now on to the show. Welcome to a fresh episode of The Sandbox. I'm your host for today, April Dawn Scheffler. I know it's been a hot minute since I have recorded an episode, and all I can say is that there's been a lot of reworking on the inside. I just feel as though this whole Mars retrograde cycle, he's almost about to clear his shadow. It has really forced me to look at my motivations for doing things. And not to say that they were ever evil or ill-intentioned, because I've had to rework that as well. There's been so much junk that has gone down that has forced me to look at how do I view myself, regardless of how someone else views me. Do I believe their view of me? That's another story altogether. But part of that reworking has been, who am I and what is my worth if I am not contributing to the well-being of the collective, if I am not participating or giving in some way, if I have nothing to show, so to speak, for my presence here on earth? Like, what is it that why am I here, and what is my value inherently as a human being, apart from my ability to help and contribute? Because with a Mars ruled chart, I am very much about action and accomplishing things, being able to see something concrete that I've done. So this period has been, who am I if I am not the podcast, if I am not writing a book? Who am I if I am not having paying clients that want to book readings in whatever the modality of the moment is? Who am I? And I've come out on the other side of that, where I know some people harp on consistency, and I'm thinking that the consistency that I need to be focusing on is how I consistently show up for myself. So if that means for that week or that month or that year, it doesn't feel correct or right or fun or motivating to do a podcast episode or to write that article, then I'm not going to do it. Because I am consistently showing up for myself, even though that consistency may not look like consistency in output, if that makes sense. So that is where the reworking has been. And like I said, some work on self-esteem issues. Do I really believe that I'm a good person? Despite some fallout. I read this recently, and I wish I could attribute it correctly to the right person, but it was talking to the fact that kind of like the milestone or the goal of spirituality, so to speak, here as a human, is to accept and love yourself without thinking that you are faultless. So, what does that look like? What does it look like to give yourself permission to be wrong, permission to exhibit anger and bad, evil things, like things that aren't love and light? Are you able to show yourself compassion and forgiveness and not internalize that as you being a bad egg? This can also go back to the fact that in the Enneagram system, I identify as a number 1, and that's because of the strong inner critic that often tells me you are bad. And so anytime that I pick up on a hint of that outside of myself, it really is triggering because I'm constantly battling that within. And so having this external trigger, it's made me face these inner demons and come to terms or make peace with shadow as well as the light. And one of the reasons why I'm wanting to do a podcast now, as opposed to last week or last month, I just feel like there are so many synchronicities that are happening that that's when I often want to do a podcast, because I want to kind of keep track of them. Otherwise, it just escapes me and it kind of blurs. And then later down the road, I kind of forget the magic that was happening all along. So, and I know I'm going to be missing a lot of it, but I just wanted to recap some of the things that have been happening the last several days and just go from there. So, Merlin over at ancientastrology.org, you can sign up for a free, that's Cujo walking through. You can sign up for this free emailed course talking about ancient astrology, of all things. Who would have thought? This is like a side note, another rabbit hole, but I remember reading my own Akashic records, and I don't know that I've told anyone this because there are certain things that I receive or I channel or I'm writing down, and they seem to be contrary to fact. Like, there's no way this is true. And so you just gotta sit with it. And now I'm going to be butchering this up because it's been forever since I wrote this down. But it was talking about how the number 7 has always been, since the dawn of time, the way that Source has divided things up for ease of communication and cooperation. I was thinking to myself, okay, it's not Tesla's magic numbers of 369. It's not any of these. Why 7? The only thing that I can think of that's 7 is the length of a week. So I just sat with that. And when I was going through this ancientastrology.org course, the title of it is Secrets of the 7 Stars. And it kind of gives you the creation story of source energy. Like, it starts from the very beginning and how ancient astrologers viewed everything, including the planets and how the planets affected us, and how, there are only 7 planets, the sun and moon being considered planets, 7 bodies, and how that was what they worked with because that's what they could see in the heavenly sky, and how that 7, and I haven't finished the course, so there may be even more about it, but it was talking about how 7 is the orderly, very synergistic way of having split up these energies. Again, that was just another rabbit hole. I'm like, oh, well, that's why you always need to trust what's coming through, because even though your thinking mind in the moment may dismiss something, there could be truth to it if you just hold on to it and just kind of hold space for the fact that it could be true. And sometimes you'll find later down the road that it is indeed substantiated and supported. But anyway, in this course, it was talking about how the ancients viewed source energy as good. And I don't want to cry. I think I can't help it. But I wrote in my morning pages, because I've also started the Artist's Way 12-week challenge. I was writing in my morning pages that I want to believe that. It has been so long since I thought of God and source energy as good. And that is because of my brother Adam's death. That just rocked my world. And, that's been 11 years ago. And that was definitely just like some trust that was broken. I felt broken. So I wrote, I want to believe that God is good, that source is good. And if I dug a little bit deeper, I want to believe that God is good because we often believe ourselves to be sparks of the divine. And I want to believe that I can be good, that I'm good. But how is that possible if I don't even think that creator, source energy is good? So anyway, it was talking about how this goodness, it encompasses both light and dark, light and shadow, because both are good. And so I am still coming to terms with some of the stuff we perceive as evil in the world. How can we trust in a loving creator, this loving source energy that still cares about us in the here and now, when there are bad things that happen? Well, continuing on, yesterday I read Eric's Feasting Friday newsletter. I subscribe to that each week. And his newsletter was all about trust of all things. And it sounded like a very similar journey to mine. Of course, the circumstances were different, but yeah, learning to trust. Trust is a huge thing, I think, for a lot of us. And I don't want to get too philosophical, but also in numerology, with my life path number being 7, apparently that's one of the things our life soul purposes / challenges is that of trusting others, maybe trusting ourselves, trusting God. And then last night I had an emotion code session, and we were able to work on my heart wall. And one of the emotions that came up to be cleared in my heart wall was that of lack of control. And that can be either, a lack of being able to control yourself, or a lack of control of things going on around you. And I think that's why I wanted to bring this up, because sometimes I get so wrapped up in my job and in my spiritual practices and things like that, that when I hear about some of the crazy things that are happening out in the world, it seems like it's a split reality. It's an alternate reality. And I'm thinking to myself, wait, have we time traveled into the past, into the Cold War, or this or that? And things just seem so bizarre, so crazy and wild and divisive. And I found myself really going into this fear space last night as I was talking with someone about, well, basically, they were filling me in on some of the things that were happening. It was just really discombobulating is a word that's coming up for me right now. Very unsettling. So we will go from that and then to today. All right, I want to interrupt this fascinating monologue to tell you about an event that's coming up. I have an affiliate link in the show notes for you to click on if you're interested in purchasing tickets. But I am actually going to be presenting at the Ecstatic Forest Festival this year. You may have heard last year I did an audio diary of sorts every day of the festival. This year I am returning, of course, and I actually put an application to be a presenter of a couple of workshops. One of the workshops was accepted, and that is the one based on rewriting your story literally. And as it applies to today's episode, you can take these skills and not necessarily have to rewrite a story in the past, but you can also use them to rewrite the story that you're writing in the present moment about what you're telling yourself, what you're capable of, and just reclaiming that sovereignty over your own story. I would love to see you there. It's going to be next month. And there are a ton of other presenters as well who are fascinating and awesome, and you're not going to want to leave. But you will have to, and you then get that opportunity to integrate and share that as part of your living experience with others who need that. I usually pull a tarot card every morning, and this is what I got today. 7 of Wands. Wands is all about that fire energy. If you can see his face, we're looking at the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck. He looks he's got his game face on. If not angry, at least very serious about whatever he's doing. It looks like he has some sticks in the ground in front of him, and he has this last one, the 7th one, in his hands, and he's about to like jab it into the earth. So to me, haven't thought about all of the uncertainty. I was like, what if this person is saying here and no farther, right? Staking one's ground. What the word that came to me was boundaries. And then I went ahead and pulled another card asking for context. Is this like a fighting energy, or is this more of just healthy boundaries, or what is it that this is talking to me about? And I pulled this, the King of Cups. And cups being all about water or emotions, having that mastery over your feelings, reclaiming the throne, reclaiming that sovereignty over your own inner well-being and emotions. So I thought that was really cool. Just that encouragement to put in those stakes, those boundaries, as it pertains to my inner well-being, my sovereignty, my emotions, not letting fear or scarcity and those types of things come up. Because one of the things that I was allowing to percolate in my brain is how things are now. Sometimes I don't feel like I have the bandwidth for this. So if things were to get, let's just say, more spicy or more challenging, I was like, I don't know that I have it in me to meet the challenge, any challenges. I think it's really interesting that some of the people looking from the outside at me, they seem to have this perception that I am up to the task, like up to any task or challenge that I can handle stuff. And the thing is, that's not necessarily how I feel. I don't feel like that's necessarily true on the inside. So I was like, if I'm being asked to be any more self-sufficient, I think it's just asking a little bit too much. I don't know. I don't have the bandwidth or the inner strength to do it, because as much as some people see me as a go-getter and getting stuff done, there's also just as true this part of me that wants to be taken care of, that wants to be able to sit back and be cared for and protected, who doesn't want to do the hard things. Anyway, so that's what I was really appreciating about this card pull today, was that Seven of Wands and the King of Cups, just having that mastery over my own well-being and trust, going back to that whole trust issue, exploring the concept that the premise rather, that source energy can be trusted, should be trusted, and that I can trust source energy. I can trust myself to rise to any occasion, and I can trust myself to have that mastery over how I'm feeling. And it just keeps coming. I got an email from the Dark Pixie, because I subscribe to her newsletter, and I just wanted to read to you a bit talking about the Pluto aspects. The hardest Pluto aspects are when transiting Pluto is conjunct, square, or opposite your natal sun or moon. This means you may be hit hardest by Pluto in Aquarius if your sun or moon is in Aquarius, which would mean a conjunction, Leo, which would be an opposition, or Taurus or Scorpio, square. All right, guys, so this Pluto in Aquarius gives me two squares. It gives me a square to my ascendant in Scorpio, as well as a square to my moon in Taurus. So let's continue reading what she says. The sun rules who you truly are, while the moon rules your emotional self and what you need for emotional stability and security. Hence, these being the most challenging aspects. So, yeah, it goes back to what I was just experiencing last night. This sense of security goes back to like the root chakra. How safe do I feel having a human experience? How safe do I feel within my body and in my own sovereignty? How well resourced do I feel? I think is another aspect or way of phrasing safety. So if those apply to you, just know I'm in the same boat with you. And then I think I'll finish this up with, I already mentioned that I'm going through the 12-week Artist Way course facilitated by Mindy Fetzer. So we just started week 2, and I read this and I was like, wow, this just goes right along with my tarot card that I pulled. This week addresses self-definition as a major component of creative recovery. You may find yourself drawing new boundaries and staking out new territories as your personal needs, desires, and interests announce themselves. The essays and tools are aimed at moving you into your personal identity, a self-defined you. So I couldn't say that any better with this King of Cups and Seven of Wands energy. All right, so I hope this has been helpful in some way for you, and I hope that there is a new episode headed your way soon, but I'm not sure. I do want to invite you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast called Starry Sky and Witchy Things. I had a really neat conversation with the host, and I believe she's going to be publishing our conversation that we had together later this month, now being March of 2023. So feel free to subscribe to her podcast. That way, when it pops up, you'll be like, oh, I know April. Okay. I do have some things in mind for the podcast going forward. So if it continues to feel right, then I hope to pursue those and again, come back to the microphone a little bit more consistently. But as I mentioned, the inward consistency may not always translate into what appears to be an outward consistency. And I need to be okay with that because again, my value is not tied up in what I can point to as having accomplished or done or even who I've helped. It's not that. So that being said, I do hope this has been helpful again, and please send me an email or go to my website, aprilific.com, click on the microphone, send me a listener comment or a question that I can address here on the podcast. So much love.